Good evening, and welcome to the May 15, 2025 meeting of the Foxborough Board of Appeals. This meeting and the public hearing that we will be conducting is being broadcast and recorded by Foxborough Cable Access. Before we begin, just want to mention that our administrative assistant, Diana Gray, is not here tonight because she is celebrating the graduation of her youngest child.
Oh, that's great.
So congratulations to Diana and family. The time being 7 p.m., Christopher Rito seeks a special permit pursuant to the Code of the Town of Foxborough, Chapter 275 zoning, Section 5.4.2, to allow a pre-existing, non-conforming, single-family residential structure to be reconstructed such that the habitable floor area of the new duplex residential structure will exceed that of the existing structure by 25% or more, and any such other zoning relief, if any, as the board may determine to be necessary and appropriate. Subject property is located at 4 Fales Place in the R15 residential district and is not located in any restrictive overlay district. You want to come up, Chris?
Sure.
So why don't you tell us what you're doing, and obviously we'll have some questions for you.
Sure. So we're looking to change 4 Fales to a duplex, as the plans show. So basically just rebuilding off the existing footprint of what's there and constructing side-by-side duplex.
So you're not going to exceed the footprint in any manner?
No, there's an existing deck that's there that we're gonna do a foundation on, but basically just going up with the existing footprint.
And that's where it's labeled porch on this drawing here, where the deck is, you're saying?
Yes. Actually, no, that's the actual porch. It's on the rear of the house, so it actually isn't shown on there, but it's an
Okay.
existing deck.
Okay.
So are you going any closer to any of the, you're not going to go any closer than any of the dimensional, any of the yards?
No.
Yard
no.
lines? Okay.
And we actually own the house to the right.
At 6
which
and
is
8?
the closest setback, right, yeah.
Okay. So again, it's going to be the same foundation? You're not taking the foundation down, not taking the house down?
We're not gonna take any of the house down. We're gonna add a foundation on the rear left where the existing deck is.
Mm-hmm.
And then use the existing foundation that's there.
What part of the structure, if any, will be taken down? Or,
So we'll probably rebuild the whole second floor to allow for some more height on the first floor. But we'll leave the walls intact and just sister up from the first floor up. But we'll still be within the height restriction as shown in the plan.
So what will the total habitable floor area be, once everything is completed?
Let me see if I can.
Right now, the single-family house has 1474, according to the assessor's office.
Right, I believe it's right around 26, but
For both units or for
for
those?
the 2 units combined.
Okay.
So approximately 26?
I believe so. Let me see if I can,
It was 30 by 35, so, yeah. Minus that cutout there.
yeah, so actually 2,100,
2100?
yeah, total.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you. 2,100 for what?
2,100 square feet of the house would be the square
Added
footage.
on?
No, we'd be adding on about 700 square feet.
So essentially, it'll look like the one at 6 and 8?
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
Very similar.
Okay.
Are
Great.
these rentals, or are you selling these? or-
They're rentals.
So you and your company will still own them?
Yeah, we hold all of our properties, so.
Okay.
I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, Eric, any questions?
So you don't do any condo type options? It's just strictly apartment rentals?
Apartment rentals, exactly.
Kurt, any questions?
No, it's pretty straightforward.
Blair?
None, straightforward.
Ma'am, do you have any questions for us, or
I do.
can you get near a microphone? Would that be?
Yeah, I'm real hard of hearing it.
But we-
I go up there.
Yeah, if you would, please. And if you could tell us who you are and where you live when you start?
My name is Nancy McGraw.
I'm sorry?
My name is Nancy McGraw,
Okay,
and I live at True Fails Place,
okay.
which is a corner.
Yep,
And I just have a few concerns. I've lived there for 30-some odd years, and my neighbors were there most of that time. We knew where our property started and ended, but we were such good friends. You know, we would overlap,
Sure.
doing gardening.
Yeah.
But I have a concern because they're rentals, you know, it could be kids and things like that. And I'm just concerned that if there's no difference showing where these people don't have access
Sure.
to get, I want to make sure that they don't get into my property.
Right, we're gonna do-
Especially kids.
Of course. So we're gonna do a fence very similar to the house 2 doors down from you, so we'll do a fenced-in yard. So you would have that buffer between your house and
It would
the-
go from the back.
all the way to the rear of the house, yep. And then it would cut across the driveway, and if you'd like, I can run it along the property line to the edge of the road.
I don't mind the driveway as long as they know that, you know, you
course.
only own 18 feet.
Yep,
I own the rest.
yep, of course.
So I want to make sure that it's just kind of gravelly for them now.
Sure.
And mine is
We're
grass.
actually gonna do an asphalt driveway there, so it'll be an actual driveway.
Will be an
Yep.
asphalt, okay.
But we can certainly put, whether it be a chain link or even if you wanted plantings along the
I don't
driveway.
really care, as long as it keeps people
Sure.
where they need to be.
Yep.
I don't want kids getting in my yard, and I end up at my age having a lawsuit.
Of course. So we're gonna fence in the whole yard.
Okay.
So that's our plan. We fence in all of our properties in the rear.
Is the front going to be further out than the duplex that you just did?
No, it's gonna be right where the existing structure is. Yep. Sorry.
All right,
So,
pretty much, I'm concerned about my
yep,
property.
no, understandable. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
good, thank you.
Thank you.
So, we have no other questions. Does somebody want to make a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
Okay, all in favor? So I only have two conditions that I want to add. One would be that the design and construction be in accordance with the architectural plans from Colwell. Second is we need you to submit a certified plot plan.
fair enough.
The mortgage inspection plan doesn't work, number one. You know, our application does say a certified plan does not allow a mortgage inspection plan.
Yep.
Also, I know Diana contacted you and you hand wrote in the dimensional, you know, setbacks. I don't think the gentleman who did the survey would be too appreciative of that. And third, back in 1974, the planning board actually had a survey done, and the dimensions that they show on here are different than the dimensions you show on there.
Okay.
So I think what we need is to have a certified plan that
Of
will
course.
be, you
Yep.
know, clear
Yep.
for our purposes, for the building inspector's purposes, and clearly for any future owners of the property's purposes.
For sure.
So my second condition would be submission of a certified plot plan to the building commissioner not later than, would May 26 be okay?
Oh, we'll get on it right away, yep.
Not later than May 26, 2025, which plan is to be attached to and incorporated in the board's written decision. Okay?
Fair enough.
Any other conditions?
No.
Okay, you want to make a motion to approve with those?
Just one quick question. Is the 26th, is that enough time, do you think, to get a?
Yep.
is it-
Yeah, I already have an engineer ready to go.
Okay,
I just wanted to
fine.
make sure I was gonna get approved before I went through the whole
Okay.
thing, so, but yes, that's plenty of time.
Motion to approve the duplex renovation at 4 Fails Place with conditions as stated.
Second?
Okay, all in favor? So the sooner you can get that to,
Yep.
you know, to Scott Shippey, the sooner we can get it filed with the town clerk, we can probably get it done, you know, pretty much around the 26th, 27th, so.
Yeah.
And you know what the process is after that.
I do.
Okay, thank you very
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Just give us a minute, and if you want to come up. Sure.
Yeah, I know.
So we have a request from David Fitzgerald, who resides at 1 Cary Lane, which is in the Wyman Village complex, to install solar panels
Yes.
on his roof. For those who weren't with the board at the time, we granted a comprehensive permit in April of 2015 for 20 detached, single-family dwellings, 25% of which would be affordable. The permit decision prohibits any alteration or change to the residential units unless authorized by this board in accordance with the pertinent state regulations. It also prohibits any amendment, revision, or modification of the written decision except pursuant to those regulations. The documents for the homeowners association that govern the Wyman Village complex require approval by the homeowners association trustee of any exterior alterations to any of the residential units. And those documents specifically include the installation of roof-mounted solar panels. We received an email on May 10th from John DiNapoli, who's the trustee of the Wyman Village Homeowners Trust, approving the installation that Mr. Fitzgerald has requested. And what we need to determine is whether this would constitute a substantial or an insubstantial modification of the permit. If we determine that it's substantial, then we have to have a public hearing. If we determine that it's insubstantial, then it's approved. And the regulations indicate matters that are generally considered to be substantial, and that would be an increase of more than 10% in the height of the buildings, an increase of more than 10% in the number of housing units that were proposed, a reduction in the size of the site of more than 10% in excess of any decrease in the number of housing units, a change in the building type. For example, if you go from apartments to detached homes or vice versa, and a change from one form of housing tenure to another. Matters that are generally considered to be insubstantial would be a reduction in the number of housing units that's proposed, decrease of less than 10% in the floor area of individual units, a change in the number of bedrooms within individual units, a change in the color or style of materials that are used, or a change in the financing program under which the development has been approved and is being financed. A little bit more than a year ago, we had an identical proposal, an identical request from one of your neighbors, and we made a determination that it was insubstantial. And I think, based on that precedent and based, of course, on exactly what is being done, I would deem it to be insubstantial. But let me open it to any questions anybody may have of Mr. Fitzgerald, and if you want to obviously add anything to it, feel free to do so.
I don't have any other questions. I just here to make sure that the zoning people approve of it so that Mr. DiNapoli will be able to authorize the installation of the panels.
Will the panels be flush to the roof?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any questions, Eric?
None for me.
Kurt?
No questions.
Based on the criteria, seems pretty obvious.
This would be the, actually the fifth modification that we've made, as far as the permit with respect to this particular development, and the second as far as solar panels. So the motion that I would make, or request somebody to make, is to determine pursuant to 760 CMR 56.05 11A that the requested modification is insubstantial with reference to the factors set forth at 760 CMR 56.074.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Approved. We'll prepare something in writing, which Diana will get to you. You'll need to file that in the Registry of Deeds,
Okay,
okay?
Yes.
There's no appeal period as far as this goes. So as soon as you get it, file it, and then let Mr. Shippey know
okay,
that it's been filed when you request your building permit.
sure. Is there a expected time as to when I might receive that information?
Hopefully next week,
Okay,
hopefully by the middle, towards the end of next week.
all right, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you don't get it by the end of next week, give Diana a call, Diana Gray a call,
Yes,
okay?
all right, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Where's everybody else?
Out in the hall.
Okay. You want to come up?
Absolutely.
The same wouldn't be true if they wanted to say like ground-mounted panels.
Appropriate.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it might not be, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if there should be any language in like, flush roof.
I'll get to see what's behind the curtain.
The language in the trust agreements, I think, is just solar mounted. Roof mounted.
Oh, it does say that, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay.
Right, because wouldn't it take
Leave
up
the
the
blocks
footprint, it
alone,
could
though.
decrease the size by more than 10%, right? So-
Above my pay grade.
And supposedly people think they're dangerous because like in the high winds, they can be
All right, now it's
over or something like that, right?
All right. So we're here to discuss East Belcher. Just to bring things sort of up to date. So the planning board opened their hearing on the site plan review and special permit request. And Lorraine and Blair attended that meeting. They continued it till next Thursday. On Monday, the planning board members inspected the property, as did Mr. Shippey and Blair and Matt Brennan and I, and Mr. Chaplin. The portion of the property or the lot that is subject to the planning board's jurisdiction, has been work to clear that. There's obviously more to be done, but that work has commenced. Our obligation, obviously, is to deal with the property as a whole and the personal items that are on that property, and ultimately to ideally reach an agreement as to what is germane to the business and can remain on the property, and what is not germane to the business and should be sent elsewhere by August 31st. I think everybody has received, I hope, a spreadsheet that Diana prepared on the basis of the material that Mr. Cook had presented a couple of weeks ago. And I think if we all work off of that, we're in figuratively and literally on the same page. When we were at the property this past Monday, Steve Blair and I, Steve Blair, actually Scott I think was there as well. We were talking with Attorney Almeida about some of the concerns that we had. And one of the issues that I had that might make this a little bit easier to proceed with is to determine what personal property items are either now housed inside a structure or can be housed inside a structure, whether it's the existing building or in any number of sheds or other structures. So Brian, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to talk with Mr. Cook about that?
I have, Mr. Chair, thank you. And I wouldn't say it's a fully developed conversation, but I think that based on our discussion at the conclusion of the site visit, I think that's certainly an option with respect to either sheds or shipping containers or something of the sort to contain a lot of these items. And I think that if they are able to be stored that way, that would hopefully moot some of the need to remove all of it if it's being housed in a way that's, to some extent, I had the opportunity to reread the board's decision that led to this, I guess, remand opportunity to revisit the issue. And I think to some extent, what constitutes a junkyard or an auto junkyard is sort of, to paraphrase the Supreme Court talking about a much different subject matter, you know it when you see it. And I think that in my discussions with Mr. Cook, it's certainly about removing items that are unrelated to the business. It's certainly about having this discussion, but it's also, to some extent, can these items be organized in a way that is much more visually appealing and less, I suppose, within the definition of what the board's trying to avoid.
So if we go through the list, and I don't want to go through it item by item by item, but are there certain categories of items of property that would constitute the kinds of things that could be stored within a structure? You know, for example, there are a lot of items that are referenced as tools.
Took the words right out of my mouth to
Okay.
Mr. Cook, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that could be stored inside.
Anything I think that's listed as tools or parts,
Chains.
chains, Mr. Cook now took the words out of my mouth. Some other categories.
And the ladder,
Yeah, no, well, see, Errol, everything here is gonna be removed. All these axles are gonna get removed.
Just to add a couple, I had suggested axles might be something that could be stored, Mr. Chair, but Mr. Cook just indicated to me that the first two items on the spreadsheet are going to be removed. So I'm going to indicate that on my list.
so the first items will be removed?
The first two, yes.
First three.
Well, the third one was already done.
Oh,
So when we see things such as body parts, bucket parts, fabrication materials, are they capable of being stored inside? You know, what I'm hoping we can do, I mean, ultimately, we're going to have a discussion as to what is and what is not, you know, part of the, as far as the physical items that would be outside, what
Yes.
is or is not part of the business. But if we can determine what is going to be inside, it certainly reduces the number of items we have to deal with.
Agreed.
You know, a toolbox, tools, you know, those kinds of things I would think can and should be maintained inside.
I agree, and Mr. Cook's indicating that that's quite doable.
I don't know if that gets the list down to about 150 items, but it's
progress.
Yep. Assuming my arithmetic or my counting is correct, I counted 38 items that are designated as customer items, including 13 that would be customer trucks. Actually, there are more than that, but 38 that are not identified, you know, for removal. So 38 customer items that are not identified for removal, and within that category, 13 that are customer trucks. Can you give us a little bit more information on that? Why would they not be designated for removal?
I can, and I can tell you that just in discussing the matter with Mr. Cook in the hallway, I've encouraged him that these are items that I think can be removed to further narrow the list. He's indicated that it's his desire to remove those items.
correct.
And he had also discussed with me the idea of potentially, if we're discussing potentially shipping containers or something of the sort to contain some of the items, he indicated that he thought that maybe he could have a shipping container designated for particular customers and put items associated with a given customer within a given shipping container.
So would that mean they're not going to be removed?
Yeah, I'm gonna try my best to remove them, but, if, say, customer has something and I haven't worked on it yet, or it's not quite ready,
Would you be able to store it in a shipping container?
yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing from Mr. Cook is, there are items on the property that are customer items that have been there for some time, and he wants them to be retrieved by the given customer, and that's his goal, is to have these items retrieved by a customer. If they're not retrieved by, I suppose, closer to the deadline to have the work done, they'll be in a shipping container.
These shipping containers will be brought onto the property for permanent or temporary use?
I would probably lean towards, at minimum, temporary, but possibly permanent, in the sense that the idea would be to just better organize the site and.
Sure. That was just the thought as I had as well, as far as, storing the stuff. If there's not a sufficient indoor space or sheds on site now, bringing that in might be an option. too.
And the reason we're sort of trending towards the shipping container is there were the size of the shed that we could build was somewhat restrictive with the shipping container. The building inspector had essentially said there were much less restrictions on the dimensions of a given shipping container, and that they would probably be more feasible to do this kind of storage.
All right, thanks.
I just want to go back to the, in this regard, the letter from Attorney Lovely dated March 15, 2023, which was when our matter first began. And you attached it to the materials that you sent to us, and
Could I
he
indicate
says-
why I did so?
I know why you did so.
Oh, well, okay.
He said, "My client also stores vehicles, equipment, and parts on site for its customers. These vehicles, equipment, and parts are typically loaded into shipping containers and exported to foreign countries or transported to and sold at auction." So I think the intent that we were led to believe from the beginning was that any customer items would be gone at some point in time.
And I think I'm not to speak as somebody who has a business where it involves having vehicles and customer items, but the idea is to get it back to the customer to get paid. I think that Mr. Cook would be the first to tell you that he has items on there that have stayed longer than he wants them to, and the rubber has to hit the road, so to speak, with respect to the deadline, and whether it's getting them off-site to the customer or better organizing it, there's a need to do so, and now a fixed deadline to do so.
Now, there's also a number of vehicles on the property that, I'm going to go to Blair over here, that are unregistered.
Correct.
I assume that, without knowing for certain, that some, maybe many, are inoperable. Certainly, if they're unregistered, they're not actively being used in the business.
So.
And as far as that.
So I think that, having heard that concern on Monday, I raised that with Mr. Cook as well, and he indicated that I think we might have to maybe dive a little bit deeper into what vehicles in particular, but he was of the belief that a lot of the vehicles, again, being subject to knowing exactly which vehicles we were discussing then and which ones Mr. Cook was referring to, he thought that a lot more of the vehicles than might be assumed are registered or could be registered. And he represented to me in the hall that anything that's indicated as company truck or any designation with respect to the company, it is a registered vehicle.
Yeah, my observation was that, registered or not, there were only one or two that had current inspection stickers on them. There was a Mack in the lower yard there that had a 2018 inspection sticker on it. There were numerous ones behind the building that had 2006 inspection stickers on them. It was very difficult to find any vehicles that looked like they had been inspected in any sort of recent time. So, being large commercial vehicles, I wouldn't think that they would be roadworthy if they doesn't look like they've been on the road for a while.
So, Mr. Chair, to Blair's point and to yours for Monday, and in reviewing the decision in preparation for tonight, I did note that the distinction between registered versus unregistered vehicles seems to be important with respect to the definition of auto graveyard. Am I presuming that if a vehicle is registered, it can stay on site, or is it
Would
needing
depend
to
on
appear
if-
operable, having an inspection sticker? It would be helpful to sort of know what the common ground would be with respect to that, so that we can sort of figure out the destiny of a given vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the decision looks for what's being used in the business and what's not. My thought is if you have a vehicle on the property that is unregistered, it's not currently being used in the business. Now, that doesn't mean it may not be used in the business in the future, but I think we need to clarify which specific vehicles that are on the property, and there are a number listed here, are actively being used in the business, or I guess can be used in the business. If it has nothing to do with the towing and transport, it should be eliminated, whether it's registered or unregistered. There are vehicles that are listed here that, to my mind, have nothing to do with a towing and transport business, i.e. a Ford Fusion, a '65 Ford Mustang. Those kinds of things should be off the property. If you have Blair referenced the Mack truck, if that is actively being used or will be actively used in the business, then it legitimately can't stay there. But when I see vehicles there that do not have an inspection sticker on, and vehicles there that look like they've been there for a number of years, the question then, in my mind, is, why is it there? Does it have any use in the business? If it's just sitting there unregistered, to my mind, the answer is no.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could just elaborate on why I included this letter in particular, given that it wasn't my product. This was a description of the business that Mr. Cook sort of endorsed as being accurate, because I think in my discussions with Mr. Cook, it's been about, if it's related to the business, what is the business? And that was sort of the reason why I included this, is this was a description of the business that he had endorsed to me as being accurate. While I understand relation to the towing business, Mr. Lovely or Attorney Lovely had advocated that some of the use was as a commercial storage garage or motor vehicle repair shop, and he had contended that was allowed as a matter of right in the L1 zone. That's on the bottom of the first page. I did not personally confirm that. I assume that Attorney Lovely was accurate in his description, given the volume of practice that he does before this board. I only bring that up to the extent that while I agree with you that if there's a vehicle that's undrivable and inoperable, and it's there for a long period of time, is it truly being garaged or repaired, or is it simply
Sitting there.
There's a distinction there. So I do, I guess, note that, but I agree with you that if the intention is somewhat transient, if there's a vehicle that's gonna come in, it's gonna be repaired, it's gonna leave in a matter of days, weeks. I've had my car in the shop for months before, but not longer. So I do just want to sort of draw that distinction, but I acknowledge the point very much.
Because the agreement for judgment talks about transportation and towing.
It does.
As the business.
It does, although
Yep.
I suppose I didn't read the intention of the agreement for judgment as curtailing other allowed uses.
And I would say that any realistic view of this would be that if a vehicle is in because it needs to be repaired, then it most likely has current registration, and it most likely has a current inspection sticker. There's a lot of equipment there that trailer that was parked in the lower yard there. The decking on it is just about non-existent. It has no taillights at all, let alone inoperable ones. Nobody is driving that down the road safely.
And also for vehicles being brought in for repair, it's going to be there for a finite period.
Correct. Somebody is going to be looking for it if they're paying for it to be repaired. So there were a number of items there that I started to look at, having done a lot of this for a long time, that just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So that's where I was coming from. There's 3 loader tires out back that are stacked together. Those tires are normally in a set of 4. There's 3 of them there. I'm guessing that there's 3 of them there because the 4th one blew and whoever had them, and now there's 3 there to find, no one's putting 3 tires on a loader. That sort of stuff doesn't make
Stupid
sense.
talk. This is definitely.
Let me handle it.
So,
No, I'm certainly not quibbling with that. I acknowledge that.
Well, as long as you brought up tires, there are numerous tires on the site, including really a dumpster full of tires.
That's on the portion of the property related to the site plan,
Yep.
if we're talking about the same dumpster.
Except ultimately, the planning board's going to need to make a determination as to how that property is used.
Yes.
I have trouble thinking they're going to allow for something that could be deemed at some point as a junkyard or a graveyard. I have trouble thinking they're going to ultimately determine that we can have multiple dumpsters with tires and other debris. So,
I just merely wanted to make sure we were talking about the same thing. Mr. Cook said to me repeatedly that he's fallen behind on getting rid of those tires. The purpose of them being in that dumpster is for them to be disposed of.
Okay.
That's always been the intention. Right.
Right.
Yep, okay.
I mean, we generate a couple a day, so.
Getcha.
Any further questions or other questions?
No, thank you.
Eric?
No.
Where?
I'm all set, thank you.
Kurt?
No questions.
Scott, are you with us tonight?
I don't see him.
Okay. Steve?
I don't see, oh, if I have any questions?
Or comments, or,
Well, I think
I mean,
that.
I harangued you this afternoon, so.
No, that's okay. So I think just from my standpoint, looking at this at a higher level, being the person in charge of the litigation component of this, and hopefully keeping us out of litigation would be ideal. The agreement for judgment speaks of a process. And either the board and Mr. Cook are going to come to an agreement as to what the next steps are, or we need to engage the services of a neutral third party to help us figure out what the next steps are going to be. As I look at the list and even listen to the conversation, I am not entirely sure, but it may be the case that we have a philosophical difference. So from my standpoint, what I'm listening for, and I'm not sure I've yet heard the answer, but these vehicles, and I saw some of the inspection stickers too, and they were, I think I saw 2008, some 2018s. I think from the board's standpoint, I think the point is well taken that if that
Anything that's.
vehicle does not appear drivable, how can it be actively involved in the business?
The customer vehicles.
So from my standpoint, I'd like to hear some clarification from Mr.
Yeah,
Cook and his
the things
counsel.
that Waiting.
Are they willing to come to our side on that point and acknowledge that? Or do we have a disagreement where we have to move forward with the dispute resolution process?
Did you hear his question?
I missed the question. I heard everything but. I was trying to get ahead of one of the issues.
So what I'm positing is I'm trying to tease out, do we have a philosophical difference regarding these vehicles that appear to be unregistered, or is Mr. Cook willing to adopt our view of that those vehicles are not involved in the business?
Excuse me, that is what I was trying to suss out. I think with respect to anything that's a customer vehicle, I think we're on the same page, that if it's a customer vehicle, the intention is to have it gone, or really, that's it. Have it stored in a storage container or have it gone. Mr. Cook's contended that anything that he uses, let me not speak for you, but everything you use in the business is registered.
It is unless, it might have expired. It is.
And he's contending that if he uses it in the business, it's either registered or registerable, and it only recently expired. But I think that these vehicles that we're referring to, that, to Blair's point, look as if they have not been driven in many years, or 2008 inspection sticker. I think what Mr. Cook's telling me is that falls into the category largely of a customer vehicle. So I think perhaps we're talking about the same thing. There are many vehicles, so it's tough to necessarily parse it. I spent some time after the site visit with Mr. Cook, having been asked this question. At least if you're looking at the property from the street, on the right side of the property, there are a large number of vehicles that appear more active in the business. And he was telling me that each of these is registered and he uses them frequently.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, again, like I mentioned to you last time, I'm sympathetic to the needs of a small business. The intent here is not to try to harm a small business, right? This is the first I'm hearing of, I thought the intent was to get stuff off the property, but now I'm hearing that there's more stuff coming on the property in the form of shipping containers. So my question is that what is to prevent things that are going in the shipping containers from coming out of the shipping containers and more stuff coming onto the site if there's space cleared from moving stuff into the shipping container. You see what I mean?
I do.
Because it's very easy to put things in a shipping container. It's also very easy to take them out or to acquire more stuff now that you have the space to do it. So what do we have in place to prevent that from happening?
That's a fair point. I think the concept of the shipping container is I know that it's in Mr. Lovely's letter, and there speaks to it having been an intention previously to utilize that as a way to
Yeah.
declutter the site. At least to me, given my more recent involvement, it was a new idea to me when it was raised to me on Monday.
Yeah.
And I've been, given that there seems to be agreement between the board and Mr. Cook as to the feasibility of storing items like that and the ability to declutter the site in that way, that's why I am.
But if you have to get something from the back of the shipping container, everything's coming out and it's probably gonna stay there.
Well, but, so to circle to the second part of your question, which is what prevents that. I think that, and I certainly don't want to speak for Steve, but I think that the agreement for judgment speaks to, there's a process to clean up the site and get it back in compliance, and then there's an obligation to keep it that way. So I would say that's what prevents us from recluttering the site.
And what is the recourse on the obligation if that's not, if that's not lived up to?
Zoning enforcement or enforcement by way of the agreement for judgment,
Okay.
or directly.
So what does that mean? It's kind of start back where we square one again, or?
Well, the agreement for judgment does give us the ongoing opportunity to inspect the property. That's number one. Number two, we do have the opportunity to go to the courts if there's non-compliance with the
But
agreement.
we're already in the courts.
Yeah, well, we're in the court as far as an agreement for judgment, but if there's non-compliance, to go to the court and ultimately potentially receiver.
That's a possibility. I think Kurt, to address the question, I think you posed it perfectly. What do we do if this goes sideways? Do we have to start from scratch? Right, that's a concern. We don't. This agreement, the agreement for judgment, a judgment is the end of a case, typically. There's also the business of enforcing judgments, which can be a whole other ordeal. But you start a case by filing a complaint. There's a whole process you have to go through. Judgment's the end. So we wouldn't be starting from scratch. We would be in a position of enforcing a judgment, and a judgment that was arrived at by agreement. So the board, if things were to go sideways, the board would actually be in a fairly advantageous position.
And by enforcing that, what does that mean?
In practical terms, it would probably mean a complaint for contempt or a motion to appoint a receiver to be in charge of the property, neither of which I imagine is very appealing to Mr. Cook.
Sure.
And he's working with us, so I don't think that's what he wants, and I
Yeah,
think we're all trying to
I just
avoid
wanted to
that.
bring up that point because it seemed like, seemed like an obvious one to bring up,
I'm treating it as a sort of Damocles as far as I'm concerned. The hammer, the incentive to get it done.
Just for clarification, our discussion on Monday was as far as personal property items that could be maintained indoors. And I was thinking of the building, if there were sheds that might be constructed there. And, Scott did indicate that the requirements relative to sheds on commercial properties is different than it is on residential, so that building permits would be required if they were above a certain size.
I see.
We didn't specifically talk about shipping containers, and I'm not going to say that that's something that I'm necessarily amenable to, but it's obviously something that, could be discussed. Again, there's a lot of items on here that, tools, toolboxes, things of that nature that you would think should be stored inside. You don't keep it in your yard, you probably keep it in the basement or the garage. That's where I keep it. I can't see keeping in a shipping container a customer's truck. That doesn't make any sense to me.
This issue is completely different from the truck registration thing we were just talking about, yeah.
So, but as I understand where we are right now, anything that is labeled a customer's item, whether it's a truck or something else, ultimately is to be removed from the property. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Cook is saying that anything, I guess, that he would label a company truck, whether it's currently registered, currently is or is not operable, is or is not operable, is something that is inherent in the conduct of his business.
Yes, and he's saying it's either, it is certainly usable, and it's either registered or its registration only briefly expired and can be re-registered and will be.
And I think that ultimately is the, I don't want to say the sticking point, but that's where we really have to negotiate. Which of those items truly are, utilizable and utilized in the business?
I just had a quick point on that. Is there a category of vehicles that is for use for the business that is used for parts for the business? Or are we just talking about vehicles that can be used for transport, that can actually be drivable, I guess? I just want to make sure we're not missing that piece where later we're going to say, well, this is for the business, but it's not drivable, it's just going to be used for parts because I need this for the business.
So if I'm understanding your question, it would be a vehicle that's being sort of scrapped and the parts are being used to help other vehicles repair
Yeah,
them?
but isn't that an auto graveyard then, or isn't that a junkyard?
Or salvage yard?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm not
just-
saying it's allowable.
That's my question, yeah, so just trying to clarify that. At some point, we're not going to have that conversation.
Oh, I see, all right, I
Make
get you.
sure
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
excluding that at this point.
Right, that makes sense.
I think.
Because I know
I'm-
that, sorry, go ahead. I feel like we've had that
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
before,
exactly.
so I just want to make sure we're not missing that.
Go ahead.
So I'm just surprised, I think, to hear that these containers will be used to store things that will still not be related to the business, just to neaten up. Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean,
First of all, we haven't agreed on containers, number
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh.
but that's what he's proposing. My idea was that items that are relative to the business, the tools, the fabrication
Can be stored.
materials, things of that are related to the business, should be stored inside
Right.
and not elsewhere on the property. And ideally, and probably logically, most of it is stored inside at the current time. But I want everything that he's listed here as a part, as a tool, as, something of that nature that is related to the business to be not strewn around on the property,
Right.
but maintained within a structure of some sort.
Okay.
I haven't-
I
I
just
haven't-
thought I was hearing that these containers were going to be used to put whatever's there now.
stuff that should be removed.
Yeah.
Should be removed, right?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't think that's what we're discussing. I think sort of we have this 8-page,
Right.
single-space list that we're working through, and to the chair's point, you'll see several items in a row, chains, like 5 in a row chains. I think I counted 30, or actually, that was a separate point I was gonna make. You'll encounter, fabrication materials, tools, these large chunks of spreadsheet, and, or parts. One road we could go down is we could go down discussing every single part, asking what it's used for, and trying to tease out whether it's related to the business. Another possible alternative is if there are going to be parts on site, because it is conceivable that someone in this type of business would be making repairs to their trucks,
Yep.
that the parts would be in some type of a container where they're not.
Yeah, that makes sense, I understand.
So it's more of it's trying to narrow the 8-page list, I think, down to something a bit more manageable
Yeah.
for us to have an item-by-item
Right, so in other words,
discussion on.
Yeah, Lauren, I think the idea is not to take like the old tires and stick them in a shipping
Right,
container. I mean,
right.
just, I think from what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Yeah,
Is
okay.
that the old tires are gonna be disposed of.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
is what we've agreed on. One question I would have, and maybe it's because I'm new to the game, I'm not completely clear on the scope of the business. How many employees, how many trucks are out at a time? Do we have a sense as to what that is?
Is that their business?
Yes, I'm asking.
Sometimes it's 4 trucks, and this was like 5 employees.
So to answer your question, Attorney Chaplin, Mr. Cook's telling me that up to 4 trucks are out at a time, 5 employees would be utilizing those trucks. and I can tell you from my discussion with Mr. Cook after our site visit, much of it is that certain trucks are used for certain tasks. For instance, he would tell me this truck is used when I have to pick this up on the side of the road, or this truck is used for an entirely different function. So I think that was part of it, even though not all, for instance, there's more than 4 operable registered trucks on site, but the reason for that is that some are used for certain tasks as opposed to others.
In the nature of the business, I presume would be 24-hour, like on-call kind of stuff, or is it business hours generally? Yeah.
Used to be.
Less of that now, but
Okay.
What about the transport aspect of the business? What's the nature of that?
Like I said before, anything that people ask me to do, think about it for a couple seconds and say yes or no. If we can do it, we do it. Wherever they're asking. Most of our business is not that to the side.
I would characterize it based on Mr. Cook's description as general transportation. Somebody will call and say, we need an item moved from point A to point B. And he's telling me that point B is not his site. The idea is from one site, one place off of his property to another location off of his property. So I don't think that items accumulating on site would be related to the transport part of it.
Or shouldn't be?
Shouldn't be. And Mr. Chair, if I could just piggyback off something that Attorney Chaplin had said about the shipping containers, and I think part of the general discussion. I think that to some extent in reading the board's decision, and I don't want to speak for the board in making this assumption, but I think with respect to the chains, I think that Mr. Cook would explain to me in detail how they're used for the business. But at a certain point, if there are so many chains and they're stored in a certain way, they go for somewhere the line is between legitimate business use and visually unappealing in a way that might fit them within the definition of what the board's decision sort of defined the property in general as. So I think if I were speaking at least to my thought about how the shipping containers would be used, it would be to store items that the parties might disagree as to whether or not they're used for the business, but Mr. Cook would strongly contend they are, for instance, the chains or the tools, and store them in a way that is more appealing and therefore moving us away from the definition of junkyard or auto graveyard, et cetera. I don't think the intention is to take items that wouldn't be, for instance, I don't want to look through the list and find the item that, at least in my view, would be least related to the business, but the intention wouldn't be to take that item and hide it in the shipping container. It would be to use the shipping containers as a way to, as you said, for instance, any items that would be stored in the building would sort of be outside of the scope of this list. Mr. Cook's telling me that there's limited space in the building, otherwise these items would be stored there. The shipping containers or the sheds or whatever would be a way to sort of extend the size of the building to accommodate items that would more appropriately be stored there.
And Marty, we had a case when a residential property had a couple of those shipping containers, and they were trying to, like, make apartments out of them. Remember that up on Main Street?
No, that was next to Judy's Flowers.
Yeah. So is there anything,
No, that,
I know that's a residential area, but there's no restrictions on shipping
no,
containers? or-
that was, when that container was first put there,
Yeah,
it was permissible under the zoning bylaw.
okay.
So the neighbor requested an enforcement decision to have it removed.
Right.
But it was a pre-existing non-conforming.
Yeah. Okay,
That's what that was about.
all right. I just know if there are any restrictions on bringing in these things or to an industrial site like that, you know?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to
Yeah.
talk with Scott about it.
Okay.
I don't know for certain. So where are we? Where are we going?
Those are the questions on my mind. So I had 2 thoughts on that, and I'll
I
go,
did as well. Let's see if they match.
and we'll see if they came in the same order. The first I had was more high level. What will the process be going forward? Because we're not going to walk out of here tonight with a point by point, with an agreement on everything. It's just not going to be possible, given the volume
Yeah.
of what's in front of us. So that was question number 1. I didn't necessarily come up with an answer. The other piece of it, as I'm going through the list and trying to envision how we'll continue to work through this, there is a question in my mind, and maybe curiosity is killing the cat here. But if we have a business with 4 or 5 employees or so, 4 or 5 trucks, I think I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 forklifts on the property. And as I go through the list, that's kind of a reemerging theme. There's some almost multiples in number of, be it trucks, be it trailers, be it particular types of equipment, then there are people who are using them. And I understand in the case of the trucks, it sounds, Mr. Cook's explanation is, well, different types of trucks are used for different types of jobs, so it's not like you'd only have 4 people that drive trucks and 4 trucks. You need more trucks than that. I suspect he might say the same thing for the trailers. The forklifts, I think you might have a couple different kinds of forklifts. I see there's one here that's used for extensions. I understand that, but I guess my question is, as I'm thinking about process, and how do we pare this down from 8 pages to maybe 1 page or a half a page, or maybe 3 items, or maybe nothing, where we agree on everything someday, hopefully. Those categories that have so many multiples, does Mr. Cook envision that being pared down? Or is it gonna be 7 forklifts, 30 trailers? I understand it's a little bit in the weeds, but I do think it's.
You make a good point.
An important question.
Yeah, I mean, there are 13 dumpsters,
I had the same thought. That was another example.
So my, 2 thoughts as far as process going forward was, and again, consistent with what you said, we're not going to make a decision tonight on everything. It's impossible. Maybe having 8 quote-unquote subcommittee. Blair seems to have the most knowledge as to what these items are. Maybe have he and Steve sit down with, the 2 of you. Alternatively would be to go to the neutral party. And the problem I have with the first aspect, and I really would love to save the money and the time with going to the neutral party, is if you can't reach an agreement with the 4 people as the subcommittee, we got to go to the neutral party then anyhow. And all we're doing is spending more time in that regard. So my thought is, are we best at this point in time, we pare the list down till we know what's going to be inside, what's a customer and that's going, and whatever is left, we go to the neutral party at that point. I don't know. I don't know if that's a rhetorical question or just.
If I could, I think the subcommittee is a good idea in the sense that I think even while we're sitting here, I see at least 3 items that Mr. Cook's put an R next to that indicated that they weren't previously going to be removed, and based on the conversation, they were able to be removed. That doesn't hold for the customer vehicles. We could, maybe look at the list and indicate some items that would be stored in a shipping container, for instance, chains times
Stop
4.
using
or
shipping container. Let's say use inside.
Inside.
We'll decide on what it's going to be.
Inside then. Chains times 4, tools times 3, steel tube times 4. And then I think with respect to working through what remains, I think the subcommittee is a good idea. I'd be happy to meet with whoever on the board and Attorney Chaplin and.
I'm happy to do that. I would suggest we do it sooner rather than later, like within the next, perhaps in 10 days, a week, 2 weeks, something like that.
You at the time? Sure. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think Blair's the best person in that regard.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Because of, what he does professionally. So,
And I would just add that I think, and to Steve's point, as we kind of look this down, I mean, I see equipment, I see tools, and I see vehicles, right? And we talk about customer vehicles, business vehicles, and vehicles that probably don't fit either of those categories, the Mustang in the back or whatever that happens to be. And I think, to your point that, if they aren't registered, that they have recently been registered, but I think that more than just registered, I think inspected is important. I think that's no one should, you don't want to be driving.
Servicing vehicles,
Right,
right, yeah.
right, it's got to be serviceable. And so when it makes sense to do that, so.
That makes sense.
Whether it's a customer's vehicle or a business vehicle, I think it's important that we flesh that out, because it'll really show us what is viable and what isn't, so.
Yeah, then that avoids the problem of if it's a parts vehicle, that's a
Correct.
junkyard, it's a graveyard, yeah.
Right.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right, I mean, I'm trying to methodically think of a way to kind of pare down the list where we can, you know, you have tools, customer vehicles, and business vehicles. And what's left outside of that, then, you know, that for a fourth group, and then we can go from there. But I think it gives us a kind of a set path forward.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
And
That makes a lot of sense.
So we don't need a vote, but why don't we?
Why don't we
say
do
that's
that?
consensus, go in that direction?
Okay.
That's something you guys think you can do in the
Sure.
next couple of weeks?
I think so.
Okay. Our next meeting is June 12th. Ordinarily would be the 19th, but because of, is it Juneteenth?
Juneteenth?
We're meeting on the 12th, and I don't know what time we're going to be meeting, because the planning board is also meeting that evening. So we may be meeting late in the afternoon, or 5:30, or 6 o'clock, or something of that nature.
Ooh,
Does that time frame give us,
that's a bad day for me.
okay. But Blair would be able to report back.
Blair can report, but that's a really bad day for me.
Okay, June 12th?
June 12th, I can't make it that day.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have a meeting.
You have
Yeah.
to meet that day.
But at least, you know, if the four of you meet and have some progress made, you know, Blair would be able to report back on it, though.
I think that makes sense. And you and I can have a conversation before that as well.
Yeah.
So that works.
Yeah, we decide where to go from there. Okay.
I think that's a good plan, Mr. Chair.
So we'll let you know what time we're meeting and what have you, but I guess in between, it's just up to the four of you to get together.
We can do that.
Okay,
Sounds like a plan.
good, thank you.
sounds good.
Thank you very much.
See you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, minutes from April 17. Anybody have any questions? Motion from somebody?
Motion to approve minutes from, what month was that? April 17th.
April 17th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, again, it's June 12th.
Still Thursday.
Still a Thursday. I don't know what time.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised. It'll depend on how many matters we have. Somebody came in earlier this week and got an application form from Diana and said I would be back tomorrow. So I don't know whether he's been back tomorrow. That would be an oversized garage. I don't know of anything else that's out there for June. I know that Frank Spillane's working on a couple that we may have in July, and that's one of the ones.
Are the oversized garages, how much of that is gonna change with this new accessory dwelling?
That's another one we're going to have, because Greg Spear wants to, I don't know if he's going to convert or construct a new oversized garage that he's going to have an ADU on the top.
Okay.
So the ADU, we have no control over. The size of the garage, we would.
Oh, okay, I see.
So we can issue a special permit, or consider a special permit for the garage itself, for the size of it.
And we can't restrict water or electricity or that kind of stuff,
Let's
right?
see how we can.
Yeah, right.
Let's see how we can. So I know that Greg has got a proposal there. Frank Spillane is working on a couple, but I met with him the other day. He thinks it'll be July or August.
It would prevent them from building an accessory unit if the sewer or the cesspool couldn't, or the septic couldn't handle it, right? No, the toilet? Because that would be out of our hands
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah, Board of Health.
Okay. So would they have to go before they came to us?
Either that or we would condition, or, well, it wouldn't even get to us. Probably I would think what would happen, it goes to Scott. He probably contacts Matt Brennan in the Health Department. They make a determination as to whether you can or can't, and then it goes from there.
Okay.
The only time ADUs would come to us is with non-conforming structures, if there's an extension of an existing non-conforming structure, or if the ADU is going to be part of a oversized garage.
Okay, got it. All right.
So Frank is working on a couple that I'm aware of. There's the one that Greg Spear has, the one that Diana said came in earlier this week. So I think we will definitely have something in June besides this, and then probably a couple or maybe a couple in July.
Okay.
And that's it. Anything else?
Any other lawsuits, updates?
Fingers crossed.
Sort of. Yeah. at the risk of saying it out loud, the Brodeur matter, the plaintiffs have been particularly inactive in that case, and the land court has taken notice and given them a date by which to show signs of life. Otherwise, the case will be dismissed for lack of prosecution.
Okay.
So we wait and see on that.
Just out of curiosity, if it is dismissed, could they refile it or something in the future, or how does that work? Would have to start all over again?
They can't, because it's an appeal of our decision.
That
Oh, right,
particular,
yeah,
yeah,
right, right,
no,
okay.
that's, they get one bite at that apple.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be too late. They get one bite, and it'll be too late.
I guess they could bring an action against Oil Main directly if, well, maybe have a statute of limitations.
Or I
issue.
suppose they could make another request for enforcement, get denied again, bring
Yeah.
another case.
Let's not even talk about
Seems
this.
seems a little, seems, anyway, yeah, I agree with Kurt.
Since the court issued that order, have you heard anything from Jeff or from?
I haven't.
What's the date that we're waiting?
It's, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's sometime in June.
I think it was June 8th,
It's,
probably.
it's not Jeff driving the bus.
Yeah.
Jeff's defending,
Yeah.
memory serves, yes.
Yeah.
No, it's not a, it's not
It's,
a Jeff,
Raymond.
yeah, it's not a Jeff issue.
Yeah. I thought maybe he had heard from Rainen or.
No. Brandon was definitely on the email from the court, so maybe there's, maybe his clients are not responding to him, or I don't know what the situation might be. But in any event, no word just yet.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
That's not a